When the world was young, two demon brothers, Mala and Mani, went before Brahma, the supreme deity, and said to Brahma, "We seek gifts from you, and the principal gift that we seek is this, that we become invincible to any enemy that might stand before us." And Brahma listened to this and said, "All who come before me requesting gifts will be granted gifts, but only if they complete the tasks that I set them." And he set to the two brothers immensely complicated tasks that they had to perform. But perform them they did. It took them 100 years to complete the tasks, but they completed them nonetheless. And when they returned at the end of that century before Brahma and said that they had done what the Supreme Being had sent them to do, well, what could be done but that Brahma should fulfill the terms of the pledge, and granted, laying his hands one upon each head of Mala and Mani, granted them the boon, making them invincible to any enemy. But as they stood to leave the presence of Brahma, that mighty god said to them, "A gift begets a gift. What has been given to you in goodness must be given to the world in goodness. Do not abuse the gifts that you have been given, or you may come to regret it." But did the brothers listen? No, they did not. For they set out before the world, and having arrived down upon the land of we mere mortals from the great celestial realms of Brahma, they saw horses and cows and goats and birds and fishes in the river, and they saw all manner of juicy, tasty humans, and they set about using their mighty powers, their strength, their claws and their fangs. They set about using them to rip and tear at every living being that could not run away fast enough, and gulped them down, ate them, swallowed them, lapped the blood that splattered upon the earth, until there was nothing but gristle and a few shattered bones left of them. Humans they ate, cows they ate, horses they ate, elephants they ate, every animal, every living being that could not run away fast enough within the animal kingdom they devoured and they devoured and they devoured, and though they grew fat, they never grew full. And at length, the humans that were left prayed to the gods for help in protecting themselves from these terrible brothers, these terrible demons, who seemed to have so insatiable an appetite. And Indra heard, and heard too that not only had these monstrous brothers been eating many, many humans, but eating so many other beings as well, and irate came to earth to battle them. And at first he gave them the choice: give up your wicked ways or face the sword. But the brothers laughed and said, "We are invincible. Even you, Indra, in all of your might, can do nothing to stop us." And Indra at once drew his sword and slashed and slashed and slashed at the two brothers, and they laughed and they roared, and even as the blade slashed into them and cut an arm, cut a leg, cut a wing, cut into a horn, the blood would gout. And rather than screaming in pain, the two brothers would laugh, and they would watch, and Indra would watch. For as the blood splattered upon the earth, from the soil, from each of those splatters of blood would emerge an identical copy, full size, of either Mala or Mani. And each duplicate copy would be as filled with hunger and rage as the two originals, and would set about attacking Indra and attacking any other living being that got in their way. And whereas Indra had started fighting two brothers, within the space of half an hour he was fighting 150 replicas of those brothers. And not only were they attacking him, but they were attacking all manner of other living beings as well. And Indra called to Vishnu to come down and help him, and Vishnu came, and seeing Indra hacking and slashing with his sword, Vishnu drew a different weapon and set about attacking these demons, thinking perhaps it was something to do with the sword. But it didn't matter which weapon Indra or Vishnu used, whether they drew sword or axe or trident or spear or club, whatever they used, Each injury, each wound inflicted, and even when they did manage to kill one of these demons and take a head completely off, from the stump of the neck a great fountain of blood would emerge, and if 1,000 splatters of blood landed upon the soil, 1,000 duplicate manis or malas would emerge from each splatter of blood to set about hacking and slashing and ripping and tearing and devouring. Until at length, seeing that they were far from winning the battle, they were handing the battle to their enemies, that where they'd started fighting an army of 150, now after an hour they were fighting an army of over 1,000 demons. Indra and Vishnu withdrew from the field of battle to hold their heads and think as to what they could possibly do next. And whilst they were holding their heads and thinking what on earth strategies could they use next, the demons, the two original brothers and all of the duplicate versions of them, set around devouring more and more and more life with their insatiable appetites. Like a great swarm of locusts, they would descend upon a village, and not a single human, not a dog, not a cat, not a cow, not a goat, not a horse, not an elephant, not a nothing would be left alive at the end of it. They would devour every living being that could not run or fly or wiggle away fast enough. Until a small handful of Brahmins, who had managed to run away fast enough from their village whilst the demons were devouring everything else in sight, arrived battered and exhausted and blood-stained at a temple, and knowing what had happened with Indra and what had happened with Vishnu, they too held their heads and thought, who can we turn to, who can we ask? And then one ancient elderly Brahmin, and how they'd managed to carry him all that distance, for he could no longer run, it is anyone's business, but he said, why do we not talk to Khandoba? Let us call upon Khandoba and ask for his help. And they sat and they prayed and they made their offerings and lit the candles, and they called and they sang and they chanted, and Khandoba listened, and Khandoba came. He came riding upon the back of a great black bull, his skin covered in turmeric, such that he was a great orangey yellow colour, like a living flame, and 3 great eyes blazed fire from his forehead. And with him came his 2 wives, Mhalsa, who is goddess of the merchant classes, and Banai, who is goddess of the shepherding caste. They came, the 3 of them, the 4 of them with the great black bull, the 5 of them with the mighty dog that rode always at Khandoba's side, a dog so huge that on occasion, when the bull was otherwise engaged, Khandoba would sometimes sit upon the back of that mighty dog and ride it like a steed. Into battle they went, and at first they made the same mistakes that Indra and Vishnu had made. They set about the field of battle, husband and the 2 wives and the bull and the dog, and they attacked the demons, who they could see ripping and tearing at a whole village's worth of people and animals. And the dog would sink his teeth in and bite them, and the blood would splatter, and from each splatter would emerge duplicate demons, and the bull would gore one with a horn, and from the blood would emerge more demons. And the 2 wives, Mhalsa and Banai, would hack and slash with their weapons, and Khandoba would hack and slash with his, and again from the blood splatters would emerge demon upon demon upon demon. And they realised the battle of the tide of battle was turning. They were handing victory to their enemies, for whatever they did, whichever of their many weapons they called upon and used, all that they achieved was to turn an army of 10,000 by the start of the battle to an army of 100,000 after an hour of hacking and slashing and fighting and biting and goring with horns. What could they do? What could they do? When an idea came to Banai, the shepherdess, for in a moment of exhaustion she leant against a tree, taking a deep breath before re-emerging into the battle, and she saw that mighty dog whose name has been lost to the annals of time, taking a great bite out of a demon, and the blood splattered, and some of the blood fell on the earth, and the demons would emerge. But she noticed that some of the blood stayed upon the dog's muzzle, and with his great tongue he would lick it off. And where the dog had swallowed the blood, no demon emerged. And where the dog gulped down a great gobbet of demon flesh, dripping with blood as it went down his mouth, no demon emerged. And the more she watched, the more she saw, whether her sister wife or her husband or the bull or the dog were setting about demons, the duplicates only emerged where the blood fell upon the soil. When it soaked into a sari, when it soaked into the saddle on the bull's back, when it dripped down the bull's horns but did not reach the earth, no demons emerged from that blood, only from the blood upon the earth. And so she thought, and a dazzling idea came to her, and using her magic she called forth a basin big enough for her to hold, and you would think maybe a basin big enough for a gallon, maybe 2 gallons of milk to be put within it. But you would be wrong. She rushed up to her sister wife, and where Mhalsa took a great sword and hacked into a demon, and its arm went flying in one way, and a great spout of blood came out of the severed shoulder, there her sister wife, there Banai, would hold the basin, and all of the blood gouting from the stump would fall into the basin, not a drop upon the earth, and no demon emerged from the basin. And the sister wife, Mhalsa, seeing this, twigged at once, as idea leapt from mind to mind, what was going on here. And she made sure each time she severed an arm, or a leg, or a head, she did it in such a way that the blood would gout in whichever direction her sister was holding the basin. And of course, having said to you that it looked as if it could hold 2 gallons of milk at most, this basin never quite filled, for it was bigger on the inside, and an ocean's worth of blood could go into it without it ever trickling over the rim. And when Khandoba saw what his wife, his 2 wives were doing, he too joined in with this, and made sure that where he hacked and slashed and stabbed and gouted, the blood would always go in the direction of his wife and her basin. And even the bull soon twigged to this, and the dog soon twigged to this, that they made sure as they gouged with their horns, or they bit with their muzzles, that whatever blood they didn't swallow down themselves on their muzzles or dried on the bull's horns, that blood would splatter into the basin. And so, after a full long day of battling, exhausted and tired, by the end of it, almost every last demon was dead. Heads off, arms off, legs off, and every drop of blood from their body had gone not upon the soil to duplicate themselves, but into the magical basin, or down the dog's gizzard. There were but 2 demons left, the original Mala and the original Mani. And the 2 wives, and the bull, and the dog, and Khandoba himself, centred upon the 2 brothers, all weapons drawn, teeth snarling, horns sharpened, bowl at the ready. And they set about hacking and slashing, and the blood of the one brother gouted into the bowl, and as he was at the end of his breath, Khandoba said to him, "Before you leave the world, is there a boon that you would like to be granted?" And the dying brother said, "Yes, I should like you to have a white horse that I have been savouring and avoiding eating. I have been keeping it as a stallion to ride upon. I would like you to have the stallion to ride upon, so that you will have another mount should you grow tired of riding your dog or riding the bull." And the gift was accepted. And in exchange I asked but that statues of me be placed in alongside statues of you in the temples, and that small offerings be made to me in remembrance, and goodness and happiness spread in the world to compensate for all of the wickedness and suffering that I have caused. And with that, he croaked his last breath, knowing that Khandoba would grant that request. And then they delivered the final blow to the other brother and made the same offer to him. Was there a final request, a final wish with his dying breath? And he said, yes, he wanted to be offered not fruit and vegetables in the temple, he wanted to be offered chunks of human flesh, for of all of the things that he had eaten, of the cows and the horses and the elephants and the snakes and the goats and the birds in the air and the fish in the rivers, of all of the life that he had devoured, the tastiest, the most delicious thing that he had devoured were the human beings. And so he wanted human meat placed before him in the temple, and wished that there would be death and carnage and terror and suffering throughout the world, long, long, long after his own life should end. And Khandoba was so disgusted with this, he sliced off the demon's head, made sure the last drops of blood fell into that basin, and refused to allow the demon's wishes to be fulfilled, which is why there is only one statue of a demon stood alongside the statues of Khandoba from that day to this. And then the two demons dispatched, every last demon over and done with. Banai put down her enormous bowl, which, though it looked as if it could carry no more than 2 gallons of milk, weighed fully the many, many, many thousands of gallons of demon blood that had been shed that day. And the dog, tired and exhausted from a whole day of battling and fighting alongside his master and mistresses and defending them and attacking demon after demon after demon, sat to with his muzzle in the bowl and drank and drank and drank and drank until there was not one solitary drop of blood left in it. And such was the power of the demon blood that it coursed through his body, and every wound and tear and rip and gout that had been inflicted on him by the demons healed. And more than that, he acquired their power of invincibility. But whereas those 2 demon brothers had used it for wickedness and greed and suffering and pain, he, like all dogs the world over, used it for goodness and joy and to bring happiness into the world. Thank you.